Everyone believes this lavish $18,000 party at the Drake is to welcome the sterling heir, but I am here to end it. My navy silk dress is not for seducing my ex-husband. It is armor for my final stand. As the spotlight hits her fake smile, I grip the cold USB drive. Truth is not cruel. Lies are. Tonight, I will bury their deception on the very stage they built. My name is Freya Norwood. From the 42nd floor of our penthouse on the Gold Coast. Lake Michigan does not look like water. It looks like a sheet of hammered steel, cold and impenetrable, stretching out until it is swallowed by the gray horizon. The view alone adds $3 million to the property value, or so the real estate agents like to remind us. Inside, the silence is expensive. It is the kind of quiet you can only buy with triple-paned glass and custom soundproofing, designed to keep the chaos of Chicago exactly where it belongs down on the street, far away from the pristine, white oak floors of my sanctuary. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a crystal tumbler of sparkling water, watching the tiny yellow dots of taxis weaving through the grid below. I am 34 years old, and by every measurable metric, I have won the game. I am a landscape architect whose name appears in architectural digests and on the donor plaques of the city's botanical gardens. My husband, Declan Sterling, is the CEO of FinCor, a financial technology firm that has been featured on the cover of Forbes. Together, we are not just a married couple. We are an institution. We are a brand. We have been married for 8 years. In our circle, 8 years is a lifetime. It is a tenure that suggests stability, resilience, and a shared vision. Our marriage was built like the skyscrapers I admire, a steel framework of mutual ambition, clad in the beautiful glass of social compatibility. We looked perfect. We sounded perfect. But anyone who works in construction knows that even the most impressive facade can hide a foundation that is slowly turning to dust. The apartment behind me was a testament to our success, yet it felt less like a home and more like a showroom for a life we were supposed to be living. The sofa was a Roche-Beaubois sectional in cream leather, terrifyingly expensive and uncomfortable to sit on for more than 20 minutes. The art on the walls was abstract and investment grade, chosen by a consultant to match the neutral color palette. There were no stray magazines, no unwashed coffee cups, no signs of impulsive living. Everything had its place, even me. Declan came home at 7 in the evening, right on schedule. I heard the heavy thud of the front door, followed by the rhythmic click of his dress shoes on the hallway runner. He walked into the living room, bringing with him the scent of the city cold wind and exhaust mixed with the spicy, woody fragrance of his cologne. "Freya," he said, smiling as he loosened his silk tie. "You look stunning." He kissed my cheek. It was a practiced motion, precise and dry. Declan was 38, but in the last 6 months, he looked younger. He had always been handsome in a sharp, hawk-like way, but recently, he had polished himself to a high shine. His dark hair was cut with surgical precision every 2 weeks. His suits were bespoke, tailored to hide the slightest imperfection, though he had few imperfections left to hide. "Dinner is in 10 minutes, I said, my voice matching the ambient temperature of the room. Chef Marcus left the sea bass in the warming drawer. "Perfect," he said, heading toward the bedroom to change. "I have a conference call with the Tokyo team at 9, so we need to be quick." I watched him walk away. He was the model of a devoted husband. On my last birthday, he had rented out the rooftop of the Art Institute for a private dinner. He gave me diamond earrings and made a toast about how I was his anchor in the stormy seas of finance. The guests had applauded, some of the women looking at me with undisguised envy. Declan knew exactly how to perform devotion. He treated our marriage like a high-yield asset class. Maintain the exterior, keep the stakeholders happy, and ensure the public valuation remains high. But I am an architect. My job is to look at a landscape and understand the drainage, the soil composition, the things happening beneath the surface that determine whether a tree thrives or rots. And for the past few months, I had been sensing a shift in the soil. It started with the vanity counter in our master bathroom. Declan used to be a soap and water man. Now, his side of the sink was crowded with serums, eye creams, and exfoliants. He had joined an exclusive gym in the Loop and started going for high-intensity interval training at 5 in the morning. He came home smelling of eucalyptus steam rooms and aggressive ambition. His body, once soft around the edges from long board meetings, had hardened. He had abdominal muscles now. He checked his reflection in shop windows when we walked down Michigan Avenue. Then there were the passwords. Our home was a smart home, controlled by a central tablet in the kitchen. We used to share a passcode the date of our wedding, 2 months ago. I tried to adjust the thermostat from his iPad when mine was charging, locked, Face ID required. I tried the old code on his laptop later that week, just to check a flight reservation. Incorrect. I did not ask him about it. To ask is to admit insecurity, and in the Sterling household, insecurity was a sign of weakness. Instead, I observed. The cracks widened in the financial statements. I manage our household accounts. I enjoy the order of it, the black and white certainty of numbers. Declan has a secondary American Express Platinum card, one that is technically for business expenses but often bleeds into personal use. I usually scan the statement once a month, looking for irregularities. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, there was a charge for $412 at Le Bernardin. I stared at the line item on the screen. Le Bernardin is a magnificent restaurant, famous for its seafood. It is also a place I have never set foot in with Declan. I have a severe allergy to shellfish. The smell of steaming shrimp alone is enough to make my throat itch. Eating it would require an ambulance. I sat in my home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. Tuesday, Declan had told me he was at a strategy dinner with the board members for the upcoming merger with a rival firm. Board members are old men who like steakhouses, places with leather booths and cigars. They do not go to delicate seafood restaurants to eat foam and reduction sauces. And certainly, a bill for $400 suggested a dinner for 2, perhaps 3 people at most, not a board meeting. I closed the laptop. I did not confront him. I needed more than a receipt. A receipt could be explained away. Oh, I treated a potential client. Freya. You know how it is. He would smile that charming, condescending smile, and I would look like the paranoid wife. The emotional distance was harder to quantify. But it was there, like a draft coming from a poorly sealed window. Our physical intimacy had evaporated. For the last 4 months, our king-sized bed had felt like a vast, snowy tundra. Declan stayed on his side, scrolling through emails on his phone until his eyes drooped. When I touched his shoulder, he would tense up, just for a fraction of a second, before patting my hand. I am exhausted. Freya, he would say, his voice thick with performative fatigue. This merger is eating me alive. Once the deal closes in November, I promise, we will go to the Maldives, just you and me. I believed him, or rather, I chose to accept the logic of his excuse. Mergers are stressful. Stress kills libido. It was a rational explanation, but my gut, usually quiet, began to churn. The breaking point. The moment the crack in the foundation became a fissure happened yesterday. Declan owns a vintage Porsche 911 Targa, a beautiful machine in slate gray that he rarely drives. He treats it like a museum piece, keeping it under a cover in the garage, taking it out only on sunny Sundays to keep the engine turning. I had gone down to the garage to retrieve a set of blueprints I had left in my own car, a sensible Range Rover. As I walked past the Porsche, I noticed the cover was slightly askew. I pulled it back to straighten it and saw that the passenger side window was rolled down about an inch. I opened the door to close the window properly. As I leaned across the leather bucket seat, something caught the light. It was wedged between the passenger seat and the center console. Buried deep in the crease where the leather met the carpet, I reached down, my fingers brushing against the cold metal track of the seat. I pinched the object and pulled it out. It was an earring. I sat in the driver's seat of my husband's beloved car, holding the object in the palm of my hand. It was a large gold hoop, twisted in a geometric pattern. I rubbed my thumb over the metal. It felt light, Cheap. It was not solid gold. It was likely gold vermeil or even plated brass. It was the kind of jewelry one buys at a fast fashion outlet or a trendy boutique for $30. I do not wear hoop earrings. My style is understated pearl studs, small diamond drops, perhaps a platinum band. This earring was loud. It was flashy. It was the kind of accessory worn by a woman who wants to be looked at, a woman who is perhaps younger, bolder, and far less concerned with the quiet dignity that Declan claimed to value in me. I looked at the passenger seat. Someone had sat here. Someone who wore cheap, trendy jewelry and perhaps laughed too loud. Declan had driven this car 3 days ago. He said he was taking it to the mechanic for a tune-up. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the underground garage pressing against my ears. A typical wife might have stormed upstairs, brandishing the earring like a weapon, screaming for an explanation. A typical wife might have cried. I did neither. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I get when I walk onto a construction site and realize the contractors have poured the concrete foundation 2 inches off the mark. Panic does not fix the concrete. Rage does not move the wall. You have to measure the damage. You have to analyze the structural integrity. You have to decide whether to reinforce the building or let it be demolished. I closed my hand over the earring. The metal dug into my skin. This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a foreign object in the ecosystem of my marriage. I got out of the car, closed the door, and replaced the cover. I walked back to the elevator, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I returned to the penthouse, Declan was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of red wine. He looked up and smiled. That perfect, camera-ready smile. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked. I slipped my hand into the pocket of my silk trousers, my fingers tracing the curve of the cheap gold hoop. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I found exactly what I needed." I walked past him to the bedroom. I did not kiss him. I did not ask him how his day was. I went into my walk-in closet, placed the earring in a small velvet jewelry box, and locked it in my personal safe hidden behind a row of winter coats. I was not going to ask him who she was, not yet. Questions give the other person time to invent answers. Questions allow them to construct a defense. I did not want his defense. I wanted his destruction. I needed to know everything. Who she was, where they went, how long it had been going on. I needed to map out the extent of the rot before I started the demolition. I changed into my silk pajamas and sat at my vanity. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was calm, my eyes clear. I applied my night cream with slow, deliberate strokes. The merger was coming, but it wasn't the financial one Declan was worried about. It was the dissolution of the empire we had built. He thought he was the one in control, the CEO making the strategic moves. He had no idea that the silent partner had just started auditing the books. I turned off the light and got into bed. I lay on my back, listening to the hum of the city 42 stories below. "Good night, Freya," Declan murmured from his side of the cold tundra, turning his back to me. "Good night, Declan," I whispered into the darkness. I did not sleep. I lay there, drafting the plan in my head. Tomorrow, I would not be Freya the wife. I would be Freya the architect, and I was going to dismantle this house brick by lying brick. The morning sun hit the drafting table in my office, illuminating the blueprints for the new conservatory at the Botanical Gardens. But for the first time in my career, the lines on the paper meant nothing to me. My mind was mapping a different kind of architecture, the architecture of deception. I needed to locate the site of the collapse. Chicago is a large city, but the circle of people who can afford $12 lattes and Italian leather interiors is incredibly small. In my line of work, I know every luxury development, every penthouse renovation, and every high-end property manager from the Gold Coast to the West Loop. If Declan was spending his time and our money somewhere else, it had to be a place that met his standards. He would not be at a roadside motel. He would be somewhere that reflected the image he was so desperate to curate. I started with a phone call to Julian, a lighting designer I often collaborated with. Julian was a gossip, the kind of man who collected secrets like other people collected stamps. "Julian," I said, keeping my voice breezy, "professional. I am looking into some new residential inspirations for the Sterling project. I heard the landscaping at the Azure. That new tower on the river is disastrous. Have you been there lately?" The Azure. Julian scoffed. "Freya, darling, it is a concrete wasteland. I was there last week installing a chandelier for a tech bro. The place has zero soul. But funny you mention it. I saw that gorgeous gray Porsche of Declan's in the resident garage. I didn't know you two bought a unit there. Investment property." My hand tightened around my pen. "The Azure." "Something like that," I lied smoothly. "We are keeping it quiet for now. You know how the market is." I hung up. The Azure. I knew the building well. I had turned down the contract to design their rooftop garden 6 months ago. The developer was a man named Russo, known for cutting corners and ignoring zoning laws. It was a flashy building, all mirrored glass and aggressive angles. Marketed to the new money crowd, crypto millionaires, influencers, and people who wanted to be seen rather than understood. It was exactly the kind of place the old Declan would have sneered at. But the new Declan, the one with the teeth-whitening strips and the secret gym membership, apparently had a key. I needed confirmation. I called my contact at the leasing agency that managed the Azure, a woman named Karen, whom I had helped with a zoning issue 2 years ago. "Karen, I need a favor," I said, cutting straight to the chase. "Declan seems to have misplaced the lease agreement for our corporate suite at the Azure. Accounting is breathing down my neck for the unit number and the monthly rate. Can you pull it up for me?" There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. "Let me check. Freya. Here it is. Unit 34C. It is leased to FinCore Solutions. 12-month contract. Signed 5 months ago. Do you need me to forward the PDF?" "No need," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "That confirms what I have in my records. Thanks, Karen." 5 months. He had been renting a love nest for 5 months. Now I had the location. Next, I needed the face. I sat in front of my dual monitors, the glow of the screens reflecting in my eyes. I pulled up Instagram. I am not a heavy user of social media. I find it performative and hollow. But I know how it works. If you want to find someone who is hiding, you look for the person who is desperate to be seen. I searched the geotag for the Azure Chicago. Thousands of images populated the grid. Gym selfies, photos of avocado toast, shots of the river view. I scrolled, my eyes scanning for familiar details. I was looking for a ghost, a trace of Declan in someone else's life. I narrowed the search to posts from the last 5 months. I filtered for the evenings Declan was supposedly working late. And then, I saw it. It was a photo posted 3 weeks ago, on a Wednesday night. The caption read, "Date night with my mystery man. He spoils me." The photo showed a dinner table set for 2. In the foreground, a woman's hand held a glass of champagne. Her nails were long, painted a sharp, electric blue, adorned with tiny crystals. In the background, slightly out of focus, was a man's hand resting on the table. I zoomed in. The man was wearing a watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus with a blue dial. I bought that watch for Declan for our 5th anniversary. I clicked on the profile. Sienna Vance. The account was a shrine to narcissism. Sienna was blonde, undeniably beautiful in a manufactured way, with lips that had seen a syringe and skin that had been smoothed by heavy filters. She was 26 years old, based on her birthday queen post from 2 months ago. She described herself as a lifestyle creator and aspiring model. I spent the next 2 hours dissecting her life. I compared her timeline against Declan's calendar. February 12th. Declan was in New York for a conference. Sienna posted a photo of herself in a hotel bathrobe at the St. Regis in Manhattan. Caption, "Big city lights with my love." March 10th. Declan had a shareholder retreat in Aspen. Sienna posted a video of herself snowboarding, wearing a white Moncler suit that cost more than my first car. She was not just a fling, she was a parallel life. I looked at her photos. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark window of my office. Freya Norwood, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, minimal makeup, tailored blazers in charcoal and navy. I was structure, discipline, and endurance. Sienna was chaos, color, and fleeting pleasure. She was the sugar rush. I was the balanced meal. And Declan, it seemed, had developed a sweet tooth. I did not cry. The time for tears had passed when I found the earring. Now, I was in forensic mode. I needed concrete proof. I needed to see them together, with my own eyes, to understand the physics of their relationship. 2 days later, on a Thursday evening, nature obliged with a torrential downpour. Chicago rain is cold and relentless, turning the streets into slick rivers of oil and neon reflections. Declan had texted me at 4 p.m. late strategy session with the legal team. Do not wait up. I drove my Range Rover to the River North District, parking a block away from the Azure. I had swapped my usual luxury SUV for my assistant's nondescript sedan for the evening, telling her I needed it to transport some sensitive models that wouldn't fit in my trunk. A lie, but a necessary one. I sat in the dark car, the wipers slapping rhythmically against the windshield. I had a clear view of the residence entrance. It was 7:30. At 8:15, the glass doors opened. Declan walked out first. He was wearing his charcoal trench coat, the collar turned up against the wind. He opened a large black umbrella. A moment later, Sienna stepped out. Seeing her in person was a physical blow, sharper than looking at a screen. She was vibrant, even in the gray rain. She wore a short white dress and thigh-high boots, clinging to Declan's arm as if she couldn't stand without him. But it was not their proximity that stopped my breath. It was the way Declan looked at her. He wasn't checking his watch. He wasn't scanning the street for a taxi. He was looking down at her face with an expression of utter, unguarded adoration. He laughed at something she said, a genuine, open-mouthed laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I watched as he reached out and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek. It was a gesture of intimacy, of tenderness. In our 8 years of marriage, Declan respected me. He admired me. He partnered with me. But he had never looked at me as if I were a fragile, precious thing that he was terrified to lose. With me, he was a CEO. With her, he was a man in love. That realization was colder than the rain outside. It wasn't just his body he had given away. It was his vulnerability. I raised my camera. I had brought my DSLR with a telephoto lens, a tool I usually used for photographing landscape sites. My hands were rock steady. I adjusted the focus ring. Click, Declan opening the car door for her. Click, Sienna leaning in to kiss him, her hand on his chest. Click, Declan leaning his forehead against hers before getting into the driver's seat. I took 20 photos. Each shutter release was a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I captured the license plate, the faces, the undeniable intimacy. It was high-resolution evidence of my own replacement. They drove off in the Porsche, heading toward a steakhouse 2 blocks away. I did not follow. I had what I needed. I drove back to the penthouse in silence. The city lights blurred past me. Streaks of red and gold. I felt strangely hollowed out, as if my internal organs had been removed and replaced with clockwork mechanisms. When I got home, the apartment was silent. The maid had left. The rooms were pristine, cold, and empty. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of vintage Bordeaux. The rich, tannic wine tasted like iron in my mouth. I carried the glass to the living room fireplace. I opened my wallet and pulled out a small, folded photograph tucked behind my driver's license. It was a candid shot from our wedding day. We were on the dock at Lake Tahoe. The sun setting behind us. Declan was whispering something in my ear, and I was laughing, my head thrown back in pure, unadulterated joy. I looked at the woman in the photo. She looked so young, so hopeful. She believed in vows. She believed that forever was a contract that both parties would honor. I hated her. I hated her naivety. I struck a match. The flame flared, smelling of sulfur. I held the corner of the photograph to the fire. The paper curled and blackened. The flame ate through Declan's face first, then mine, turning our happiness into gray ash that crumbled onto the hearth. I watched until the last ember died out. I took a sip of wine. The pain that had been threatening to crush my chest since I saw them in the rain began to crystallize. It hardened, freezing into a sharp, jagged weapon. Sadness is a passive emotion. It paralyzes you. But cold, calculated rage, that is a fuel source. Declan wanted a new life with his colorful young muse. He wanted to play house in a rented condo while keeping the prestige of his marriage to me. He thought he could have both the structure and the chaos. He was wrong. I finished the wine and set the glass down on the marble coaster with a deliberate click. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin, and I would be judge, jury, and executioner. But first, I had to let him think he was getting away with it. I had to let him feel safe, because the higher he climbed, the more satisfying the fall would be. The following evening, Declan arrived home at 7:45. The penthouse was quiet, the ambient lighting dimmed to a soft amber glow. I was not in the kitchen this time, nor was I in the living room with a book. I was sitting in his study, in the high-backed leather chair usually reserved for him, facing the door, on the mahogany desk in front of me, perfectly centered on his leather blotter, sat two items. First, the cheap gold hoop earring. Next to it, a stack of 5 high-resolution photographs. Face down. When Declan walked in, he looked tired but composed, the image of a corporate warrior returning from battle. He loosened his tie as he crossed the threshold. "Freya, I didn't see you in the—" He stopped. His eyes adjusted to the room. He saw me sitting in his chair. Then his gaze dropped to the desk. He froze. It wasn't a dramatic gasp or a stumble. It was a micropause, a glitch in the software of his persona. His eyes locked onto the gold earring. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was low, devoid of inflection. Declan walked fully into the room, forcing a confused smile onto his face. He reached for the earring but didn't pick it up. He just nudged it with his index finger. "What is this?" he asked, chuckling lightly. "Did you find this in the car I told you?" "I gave a lift to one of the interns last week. Clumsy girl. Must have dropped it." "And the apartment at the Azure?" I asked. "Did the clumsy intern drop a 12-month lease in your name too?" The smile vanished. His jaw tightened. He walked over to the sidebar and poured himself a whiskey. His back to me. It was a stalling tactic. He was buying time to construct the narrative. "I don't know what you are talking about, Freya," he said, not turning around. "The Azure unit is for FinCorp. It is corporate housing for visiting consultants. You know we have the merger coming up. We have people flying in from London and Tokyo every week. Turn around, Declan." He turned, glass in hand, swirling the amber liquid. He looked annoyed now, the aggrieved husband dealing with a hysterical wife. "Freya, honestly, you have been working too hard on that conservatory project. You are seeing ghosts. First an earring. Now you are tracking corporate real estate. You sound paranoid." "Paranoid," I repeated. I reached out and flipped over the first photograph. It showed him and Sienna in the rain, his hand on her face. The intimacy was undeniable. It screamed from the glossy paper. Declan stared at the photo. The color drained from his face, leaving him a pale, grayish hue. The glass of whiskey trembled slightly in his hand before he set it down on a bookshelf with a hard clatter. "Who took these?" he whispered. "Does it matter?" I flipped the second photo, him kissing her. "Is this a visiting consultant from Tokyo, Declan, or is she the intern who lost the earring?" He closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. The denial phase was over. He couldn't gaslight his way out of high-definition evidence. He let out a long, ragged exhale and looked at me, his eyes wide with feigned remorse. "Freya, look," he began, his voice dropping to a pleading register. It meant nothing. It was a moment of weakness, the stress of the merger, the pressure. I just lost my head for a second. She was there. She was available. And I made a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. A mistake, I said flatly. You rented an apartment for a mistake. You bought her a $400 dinner at Le Bernardin for a mistake. You have been seeing her for 5 months. Declan, that is not a slip-up. That is a campaign. It's over, he said quickly, stepping toward the desk. I swear to you, Freya, it is done. I will break it off tomorrow. I will cancel the lease. We can move past this. You and I, we are a team. We have built too much to throw it away over a fling. A fling. I stood up. You looked at her like she was the only person in the world. I saw you. Declan, I saw the way you touched her. Do not insult my intelligence by calling it a fling. His expression shifted again. The remorse evaporated, replaced by a cold, defensive anger. He crossed his arms, leaning back against the bookshelf. Fine, he snapped. You want the truth? Yes, I have been seeing her, and you want to know why? Because I can breathe when I'm with her. Look at us. Freya, look at this house. It is a museum. You are perfect. You are always so composed, so successful, so cold. I come home and I feel like I am walking into a performance review. Sienna, she makes me feel like a man, not a project manager. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was blaming his infidelity on my competence. So because I manage our life efficiently, you are entitled to sleep with a 26-year-old Instagram model, I asked. She appreciates me, he shouted, his voice cracking. She doesn't analyze everything I say. She doesn't look at me like I am a balance sheet that needs to be reconciled. I was suffocating. Freya, then you should have asked for a divorce, I said quietly. You don't cheat. You don't lie for 5 months and then blame me for your lack of integrity. I walked around the desk and stood in front of him. I want you out. Tonight. What? He blinked, caught off guard. This is my house too. I am the one on the deed for this apartment. Declan, I reminded him, you are on the mortgage, but I owned the land trust before we met. Pack a bag, go to your corporate housing, go to Sienna. I don't care, but you are not sleeping here. He stared at me, searching for a crack in my resolve. He found none. Fine, he spat. If that is how you want to play it, but don't think this is simple. We have assets. We have the company shares. We will let the lawyers handle the math, I said. Just get out. Declan stormed into the bedroom. I heard drawers being ripped open, the zipper of a suitcase. 10 minutes later, he walked out with an overnight bag and his garment bag. He paused at the door, looking back at me with a mixture of resentment and arrogance. You will cool down, he said. You will realize you are overreacting. We are the Sterlings. Freya, we don't just end. Goodbye, Declan, I said. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy. But for the first time in months, it felt clean. I did not sleep well that night. But the next morning, I woke up with a clear head. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Evelyn who specialized in high-net-worth divorces. Freeze the joint accounts, I told her over coffee. I want a full audit of his spending for the last year. If he spent marital funds on her, I want it back. Every penny. We can do that, Evelyn said, taking notes on her tablet. We will file for separation immediately. If he cooperates, we can have a settlement drafted in 6 weeks. It will be clean. For the next week, the penthouse was peaceful. I went to work. I focused on the conservatory project. I felt a strange lightness, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. I started to believe that the worst was over. Declan was a narcissist, yes, but he was also pragmatic. He would want to protect his reputation and his company. He would settle quietly. On the 8th day, the intercom buzzed at 7 in the evening. It was the doorman. Mr. Sterling is here. Mrs. Norwood. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. I hesitated. Send him up. I waited by the door. I expected him to come with a lawyer, or perhaps with a peace offering. a desperate attempt to reconcile. When the elevator doors opened, Declan stepped out. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. He looked pale, shaken, his eyes wide with a frantic energy I had never seen before. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans and a sweater, looking like a man who had been up for 48 hours. "I told you to talk to my lawyer," I said, blocking the entrance. "Freya, please," he said, his voice trembling. "I am not here to fight. Something has happened. We need to talk, face to face." I stepped aside and let him in. He walked into the living room and stood in the center of the rug, wringing his hands. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Did the merger fall through?" He laughed, a short, hysterical sound. "The merger. No, God. I wish it was that simple." He turned to face me. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. "It is Sienna," he said. My stomach tightened. "What about her? Did she leave you now that the credit cards are frozen?" "No," Declan said. He looked me straight in the eye, and for a moment, I saw genuine terror in his gaze. "She is pregnant. Freya." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I stood very still. "Pregnant," I repeated. 3 months, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She took a test. Then we went to the doctor yesterday. It is confirmed. 11 weeks along." He paused, swallowing hard. "It is a boy." The silence in the room was deafening. A boy? We had never talked much about children. I had always been focused on my career, and Declan had said he was indifferent, but I knew his parents. I knew the pressure of the Sterling name. A son, an heir. "Congratulations," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "So you came to tell me you are starting a family." "I can't leave her," Declan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Not now. I have to do the right thing. Freya, a child. That changes everything. I have to be a father." He looked at me with a pleading expression, as if asking for my blessing, or perhaps my forgiveness. "I need the divorce to happen fast," he continued. She is high risk. The stress isn't good for her. I need to marry her. Freya. Before the baby comes, I need to legitimize him." I looked at the man I had spent 8 years with. He was asking me to speed up the dissolution of our life so he could build a new one with the woman who had helped destroy it. He wasn't just leaving me. He was replacing me, completely and utterly. "Get out," I whispered. "Freya, I know this is hard." "Get out," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, raw and unfamiliar. Declan flinched. He backed away toward the elevator. "I will have my lawyer send the papers tomorrow," he said hurriedly. "I am sorry. Freya, I really am." The elevator doors closed, shutting off his face. I stood alone in the silent, expensive apartment. A baby, a son, 11 weeks. I walked to the window and looked out at the black void of the lake. I felt a coldness spreading through my veins. Colder than the Chicago winter, but beneath the shock, beneath the pain, a tiny spark of logic flickered to life. 11 weeks. I closed my eyes and did the math. 11 weeks ago, Declan was in London for the FinTech Global Summit. He was gone for 10 days. I opened my eyes. The reflection in the glass stared back at me. If he was in London, and she was here, the spark flared into a flame. I wasn't just going to divorce him, I was going to destroy him. The revelation of the pregnancy did not hit me like a tsunami. It was more like a slow-acting poison, seeping into the groundwater of my life, contaminating everything it touched until the entire landscape was uninhabitable. A boy, a sterling heir. For 8 years, I had been the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, and the perfect partner, but I had failed in the one biological imperative that men like Declan prioritize above all else. I had not given him a legacy, and now, Sienna Vance, with her Instagram filters and her chaotic morality, had succeeded where I had simply opted out. The days following his confession were a blur of legal maneuvers. I stayed in the penthouse, but the air felt thin, as if the oxygen was being siphoned off to support the new life growing in another part of the city. I slept in the guest room because the master bedroom smelled too much like the lie we had lived. Then came the proposal. It arrived via secure courier, a thick envelope from Declan's legal team. I sat at the kitchen island, a cup of cold tea beside me, and read the terms. I expected a standard division of assets. We had a prenuptial agreement, after all, but what I read made my blood run cold. Declan was requesting an expedited divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences due to family planning incompatibilities. He wanted to be free in 30 days, but the insult was not in the timeline. It was in the real estate clause. The petitioner requests to buy out the respondent's 50% share of the primary residence at 110 East Delaware Place. He wanted the penthouse, but he did not want to pay market value. The offer listed was based on the original purchase price from 8 years ago, completely ignoring the $3 million in renovations I had personally designed and funded. The justification was typed in sterile, legal language. In consideration of the petitioner's urgent need to provide a stable home for his expected dependent, he wanted me to subsidize his new family. He wanted to raise his mistress and his son in the home I had built, amidst the gardens I had planted on the terrace. Surrounded by the walls I had chosen, he wanted to erase me from the narrative, but keep the stage sets I had constructed. I threw the document across the room. It fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. It was not the money. I had my own money. It was the absolute, breathtaking disrespect. He thought so little of me that he believed I would hand over my sanctuary just to make his transition to fatherhood more convenient. My lawyer, Evelyn, set up a meeting for the following Tuesday. He wants to meet in person, Evelyn told me over the phone, her voice guarded. He thinks if he explains the situation rationally, you will agree to the terms. He is bringing his counsel. Fine, I said. I will be there. The meeting took place in the glass-walled conference room of Evelyn's firm on Wacker Drive. The view outside was gray and rainy, the city looking like a watercolor painting left out in the storm. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a suit of steel gray wool. My hair pulled back so tightly it pulled at my temples. I needed the pain. It kept me focused. At 2 o'clock, the door opened. Declan walked in first. He looked tired but determined, wearing a suit that was slightly less sharp than usual, perhaps a calculated choice to look like a weary father-to-be. His lawyer, a man I knew by reputation as a shark named Marcus Thorne, followed him, and then she walked in. I had not expected her. Evelyn had not expected her. Sienna Vance entered the room as if she were walking onto a runway. She was wearing a cream-colored knit dress that clung to every curve. It was modest by her standards, high-necked and long-sleeved, but it was designed to highlight one thing: the slight, barely there swell of her lower abdomen. She was 3 months pregnant. There was hardly anything to show, but she walked with her hand resting protectively over her stomach, pushing the fabric down to accentuate a bump that was mostly imagination and posture. She looked glowing. That infuriating, hormonal radiance that people talk about was real. Her skin was dewy, her cheeks flushed with health and victory. "I hope you don't mind," Declan said, pulling out a chair for her. "Sienna is part of this now. Her future is tied to the settlement." Evelyn stiffened beside me. "This is highly irregular. Mr. Sterling, these proceedings are confidential." "I have nothing to hide from the mother of my child," Declan said, his voice dropping an octave to sound noble. I said nothing. I just watched them. I watched the way he adjusted her chair. I watched the way she looked up at him, her eyes wide and adoring, before turning her gaze to me. When she looked at me, the adoration vanished. In its place was a look of pity so profound it felt like a slap. "Hello, Freya," she said. Her voice was light, breathless. "I know this is awkward, but we just want to resolve this peacefully. For the baby's sake. For the baby's sake. The ultimate trump card." "Let us discuss the property," Evelyn said, cutting through the tension. "The offer you sent is insulting. Declan, Freya put $3 million into the renovations. You are offering purchase price. That is a non-starter. Declan sighed, leaning forward on the table. Freya, be reasonable. I have liquidity issues right now with the merger pending. I need a home for my son. You have the townhouse in Lincoln Park. You have the summer house. You don't need the penthouse. It has 4 bedrooms. It is a family home. And you are a family now, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice sounded dry, like dead leaves. Yes, Declan said. We are. Sienna shifted in her seat. She placed both hands on her stomach now, framing the invisible heir. We just want to start fresh, Sienna said. Declan wants the baby to have the best. Surely you can understand that I know. She paused, tilting her head to the side, studying my face with mock sympathy. I know it must be hard for you, at your age. These things get complicated. Not everyone is meant to be a mother. Freya, some women are built for careers. That is your strength. The room went silent. Evelyn gasped softly. At my age, I repeated, I was 34. I didn't mean it like that, Sienna said quickly, though her eyes danced with malice. I just meant that Declan needs a legacy. He has always wanted a son. It is biology, isn't it? Men need to leave something behind. I am just happy I could give that to him. She crossed her legs. That was when I saw them. Sienna was wearing a pair of navy blue velvet pumps with a distinct, crystal-encrusted buckle on the toe. They were Manolo Blahniks. Specifically, the Hangisi model. I knew those shoes. I knew them intimately. 6 months ago, I had been browsing a luxury boutique in New York with Declan. I had picked up that exact pair. I had held them, admiring the craftsmanship, the deep, midnight blue of the velvet. I had told Declan, "These are beautiful. They remind me of the night sky." I hadn't bought them because they didn't have my size in stock. Declan had been paying attention. He had remembered the shoes. He had remembered the specific model and color that I loved, and he had bought them for her. He had taken my taste, my preference, my aesthetic, and he had draped it over his mistress. He was dressing her in the ghost of my desires. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from swaying. It wasn't just the betrayal of the body. It was the theft of the soul. He hadn't just replaced me. He was cannibalizing me to build her. I looked at Declan. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at the paperwork, avoiding my eyes. He knew. He knew exactly what those shoes meant. Freya. Evelyn touched my arm. Are you all right? I stared at the shoes. The crystals caught the fluorescent light of the conference room, winking at me. You are old news. They seemed to say, you are the draft copy. She is the final print. I need a moment, I said. I stood up and walked out of the conference room. I didn't go to the bathroom. I went to the window at the end of the hallway, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. I looked down at the street, 40 floors below. The cars were tiny specks. The people were invisible. I felt small. I felt erased. The confidence I had built over a decade of professional success, the armor of my reputation, the pride in my independence, it all crumbled under the weight of Sienna's glowing skin and Declan's betrayal. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was the problem. I had focused on buildings, on landscapes, on dead things. I hadn't focused on life. I hadn't given him a son. In the brutal calculus of evolution, she was the winner. She was the one carrying the future. I was just a dead branch on the family tree. Evelyn came out into the hallway. She stood beside me, her reflection hovering in the glass next to mine. Freya, she said softly, I am going to be honest with you. We can fight this. We can demand a forensic accounting. We can fight for the house. We can drag this out for 2 years. But looking at him, looking at her, do you want to— He bought her my shoes, I whispered. What? Nothing, I said. He gave her everything. If we fight, it will be ugly, Evelyn continued. They will play the victim card, the pregnant young mother against the bitter, Childless ex-wife. The press will eat it up. Fincor is high profile. Do you want your name dragged through the mud alongside theirs? She paused. Or do you want to cut the cord? Take the cash settlement, we will get the number up. I promise, and walk away. Start over. Find someone who deserves you. I looked at the gray city. Walking away sounded like heaven. Silence. Peace. No more seeing his face. No more seeing her gloat. Just erasing them from my life and pretending the last 8 years never happened. The suspicion I had felt about the timeline, the London trip, the 11 weeks felt distant now, like a dream I had upon waking. What did it matter, even if the dates were slightly off? She was pregnant. He claimed it. He wanted it, whether it was biologically his or not. He had chosen her. He had chosen to be the father. Proving a discrepancy of 2 weeks wouldn't change the fact that he loved her and despised me. What was the point of digging for truth when the lie was so powerful? Tell him, I began, my voice trembling. Tell him if he raises the offer by 10%, I will sign. Evelyn nodded, her face showing a mix of relief and sadness. I think that is the wise choice. Freya, it preserves your dignity. Dignity. It felt like a consolation prize for the loser. Go, I said. Draft it. I just want to go home. Evelyn walked back into the conference room. I stayed by the window. I watched a raindrop trace a path down the glass. Erratic and lonely. I was ready to surrender. I was ready to sign the papers, pack my clothes, and leave the keys to the penthouse on the counter. I would let Sienna walk on my floors in my shoes. I would let her raise that boy in the room I had designed for a nursery that never happened. I was done. The architect had abandoned the project. I turned away from the window, intending to leave the building, to go down to the lobby and wait for my driver. I didn't want to see them come out. I walked toward the elevators. The hallway was long and empty. I pressed the down button, but as I waited, my mind drifted back to the image of Sienna's hand on her stomach. 11 weeks. And then I remembered the shoes again. He had bought them in New York. 6 months ago. Sienna had posted a photo from New York 6 months ago. Big city lights with my love. My breath hitched. If he was with her in New York 6 months ago, and she was claiming the relationship started 5 months ago, the timeline was a mess, but I was too tired to untangle it. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. I stepped inside, alone. The doors closed, sealing me in a metal box. I was going to sign. I was going to give up. But fate, it seemed, was not done with me yet. Because the universe hates a vacuum, and it hates a lie. And just when I thought I had hit the bottom, I was about to meet the one person who could hand me a shovel. I did not sign the papers that day. I told Evelyn I needed 48 hours to review the updated offer. It was a lie. I just needed to breathe air that wasn't recycled through a ventilation system shared with my husband's mistress. That Friday, seeking refuge from the suffocating silence of my apartment, I went to the modern wing of the Art Institute. It has always been my sanctuary. There is something about the stark geometry of the architecture and the silence of the galleries that helps me recalibrate. I walked aimlessly through the Impressionist collection, staring at Seurat's dots until they blurred into a headache. I ended up in the contemporary sculpture garden, sitting on a concrete bench, watching the wind ripple the surface of the decorative pool. Freya Norwood, a voice said. Or is it still Sterling? I can never keep up with the society pages. I looked up. Standing in front of me, holding a black coffee and looking unexpectedly rugged in a leather jacket and dark denim, was Elias Thorne. I hadn't seen Elias in 2 years. Once, he had been a fixture in our lives. He and Declan had started Fincor together in a garage in Wicker Park. They were the golden duo. Declan was the face. Elias was the code. But 2 years ago, right before Fincor went public, Declan had engineered a boardroom coup. He had forced Elias out, claiming creative differences and diluting Elias's shares until they were worth a fraction of their potential value. It was brutal, efficient, and entirely legal. I had stood by Declan then, believing his narrative that Elias was unstable and holding the company back. Elias, I said, a genuine smile breaking through my gloom. It is Norwood. Or it will be soon. He raised an eyebrow, sitting down on the other end of the bench. He looked older, tired around the eyes, but there was a calmness to him that hadn't been there before. "Trouble in paradise?" he asked. I thought the Sterling Empire was unshakable. "The foundation had rot," I said, echoing my own thoughts. "We are separating. He found someone else." Elias took a sip of his coffee. "Let me guess. Younger, blonder, less intimidatingly brilliant than you." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You have no idea. Her name is Sienna Vance. She is an influencer." Elias froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He lowered it slowly, turning to look at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. "Sienna Vance," he repeated. "The one with the tiny dog and the fake British accent when she's drunk." I blinked. "You know her." Elias let out a short, incredulous laugh. He shook his head, looking down at his boots. "Know her, Freya. I dated her. For 6 months. Right before she got hired at Fincor as a marketing associate." The world seemed to sharpen around me. The noise of the city faded. "You dated her?" I asked. "But Declan, he acts like he discovered her. Like she was this innocent flower he plucked from the accounting department." "Innocent," Elias scoffed. "Sienna is about as innocent as a fox in a henhouse. We met at a gallery opening. She was charming, I will give her that, and ambitious. She wanted to be a model, an actress, a brand ambassador. Anything that paid well and didn't require actual work. When I was at Fincor, she was all over me. She thought I was the ticket. But the moment Declan pushed me out, the moment my stock options evaporated, she was gone faster than my severance check." He looked at me, his eyes dark with memory. "She is a climber. Freya. She doesn't fall in love. She secures positions." "She secured Declan," I said quietly. "She is pregnant. 11 weeks. A boy." Elias stared at me. His expression shifted from amusement to shock, and then to something else. "Calculation." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen, scrolling back through his calendar. "Pregnant," he murmured. 11 weeks. He looked up at me. "Freya, are you sure about that timeline?" "Declan was very specific," I said. "He announced it like a royal decree, 11 weeks along. That puts conception around. Late October, early November." Elias turned his phone screen toward me. It was open to a text message thread. The contact name was simply S. "Look at the date," he said. I leaned in. The date of the last message was November 4th. Message from S. Elias. "Please, just one drink. I miss you. This job is boring and Declan is in London. I'm lonely." Message from Elias. "I told you. Sienna, we are done. Don't text me." Message from S. "Just come over. I still have that shirt you left. Or I can bring it to you, I promise. No drama. Just for old time's sake." I read the messages twice. November 4th. Declan was in London for the summit from November 1st to November 10th. "Did you see her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Elias hesitated. He looked at the fountain, then back at me. "I am a man. Freya, not a saint, and I was angry at Declan for ruining my career, angry at the world, and she was persistent." He swiped to the next photo in his gallery. It was a selfie, taken in a dimly lit room. Elias was in the background, asleep on a sofa. Sienna was in the foreground, holding a glass of wine, winking at the camera. The timestamp was November 5th, 2 a.m. "She came over," Elias said, his voice flat. "It was a mistake. One night, we were both drunk and bitter. She spent the night complaining about how cheap Declan was, how he made her keep the relationship secret, how he wouldn't buy her the things she deserved yet. She used me to vent, and, well, we slept together." He put the phone away. The next morning, she left. She said she had a fitting. I haven't heard from her since. Then 2 weeks later, I hear rumors she is moving into a condo at the Azure. My mind was racing, connecting the dots with the precision of a structural engineer. November 5th, that was squarely in the window of conception for an 11-week pregnancy. Declan was 4,000 miles away, giving a keynote speech on the future of cryptocurrency. Declan doesn't know about you, I realized. He thinks he is the only one. He thinks she is this loyal, devoted mistress who waited patiently while he played CEO. Declan thinks the sun rises because he schedules it, Elias said bitterly. He has no idea who she really is. He thinks he won the prize, but he just picked up my leftovers. The baby, I said. It could be yours. Elias went still. He looked down at his hands, watching his fingers interlock. It is possible, he admitted. We didn't use protection. It was impulsive. If she is really 11 weeks along, the math works for me just as well as it works for him, maybe better, considering he was out of the country for half that ovulation window. Does she know? I asked. Sienna? Elias laughed dryly. She knows everything. She is playing the odds. Declan is the billionaire CEO. I am the disgraced co-founder running a startup out of a shared workspace. Who would you choose to pin a baby on? I sat back on the cold concrete bench. The wind off the lake whipped a strand of hair across my face. But I didn't brush it away. It wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a fraud. A massive, life-altering fraud. Declan was destroying our marriage, buying her a home, and preparing to raise a child that might not even share his DNA. He was blowing up his life for a lie. You have the texts, I said. You have the photos. I do, Elias said. Why? Because, I said, looking him in the eye. I was going to sign the papers on Monday. I was going to let him have the penthouse. I was going to walk away and let them win. Elias looked at me. He saw the shift in my eyes. He saw the architect putting on her hard hat. And now, he asked. Now, I said, standing up. I think I want to do a little renovation. You want to tell him? Elias asked. Standing up with me. No, I said. Telling him isn't enough. He won't believe me. He will think I am a jealous ex-wife making up stories. He needs to see it. He needs to feel it. I looked at Elias. Are you still angry? Elias? About the company. About how he pushed you out. Elias's jaw tightened. Every single day. Good, I said, because I am going to need a partner. And this time, we are not building a company. We are taking one down. What do you have in mind? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I need everything you have. The texts, the photos, the dates. Can you send them to me? Done, Elias said. But Freya, be careful. Sienna is cornered. She has a lot to lose. People like that are dangerous. So am I said. She is fighting for a meal ticket. I am fighting for my name. I walked out of the Art Institute with a new rhythm in my step. The city didn't look gray anymore. It looked like a chessboard. And for the first time in months, I felt like the queen, not a pawn. I went straight back to my office. I pulled up the calendar again. I cross-referenced Elias's texts with Declan's travel itinerary. It was a perfect match. The window for conception was narrow. If the baby was truly 11 weeks, it was conceived during the week Declan was in London. Unless Sienna's pregnancy dating was off, which was possible, or unless she knew. I remembered the look on her face in the lawyer's office, the smugness, the hand on the belly. It is a boy, a legacy. She wasn't just trapping him. She was laughing at him. I sat there until the sun went down, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the evidence. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry in the hot, burning way I had been before. I was cold. I was precise. I picked up the phone and called Evelyn. Don't send the counteroffer yet, I said. Freya, did something happen? No, I lied. I want to make sure the inventory of the wine cellar is accurate before we agree on a number. Give me another week. All right, Evelyn sighed. But don't drag it out too long. His lawyer is getting aggressive. Let him be aggressive, I said. I am just getting started. I hung up. I looked at the photo Elias had sent me. Sienna and him, tangled together on a sofa, the timestamp damning them both. Declan wanted a show. He wanted a public life, a public success, a public family. Well, I thought, staring at the screen, I would give him the biggest show of his life. The partnership with Elias Thorne was not forged in friendship, but in the cold, hard steel of mutual necessity. We met the following morning, not at a coffee shop where we might be seen, but at his workspace in the West Loop. It was a converted warehouse, smelling of roasted coffee and ozone, filled with servers and whiteboards covered in code. It was the antithesis of the sterile, polished world I shared with Declan. We sat at a long metal table, two laptops open between us like weapons of war. I had brought my organized mind, the architectural discipline that allowed me to see how structures supported weight. Elias brought the chaos of data, the digital breadcrumbs that people leave behind when they think no one is watching. We are not here to reminisce, I said, opening a fresh spreadsheet. We are here to build a timeline. If we can prove the math is wrong, the entire narrative collapses. Elias nodded, his face grim. He typed a command into his laptop, pulling up a folder of archived backups from his phone. I have everything here, every text, every photo, every metadata tag. Sienna is sloppy. She thinks deleting a conversation on her end means it disappears from the universe. Let's start with the claim, I said. Declan says she is 11 weeks pregnant. That was 3 days ago. That puts the date of conception roughly in the first week of November. I typed November 1st to November 7th into the first column of the spreadsheet. Now, I continued, we need to locate the variables. Where was Declan? Where was Sienna? Where were you? I opened my calendar app, scrolling back to November. My life with Declan was so regimented that I could tell you where he was at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday 4 years ago. November of last year was no exception. Here, I said, pointing to the block of dates marked in blue. November 1st through November 10th. Declan was in London for the Global FinTech Summit. He was the keynote speaker. Elias leaned in, his eyes scanning the screen. 10 days. That is a long trip for a conference. It was supposed to be 5, I corrected him, but there was a massive storm system over the Atlantic, followed by a wildcat strike by the ground crew at Heathrow. All flights were grounded. He was stuck in London for an extra 3 days. I remember because he called me, furious, complaining that the hotel room service was subpar. I looked at Elias. Declan was 4,000 miles away during the peak of the conception window for an 11-week pregnancy. Elias let out a low whistle. So if the baby is his, and she is 11 weeks along, he would have had to impregnate her via a Zoom call. Exactly, I said. Unless she is wrong about the dates, or lying. Let's check my data, Elias said. He tapped a few keys. November 4th, a Tuesday. He pulled up a weather report from that day. Chicago was hit by that freezing rain system. Miserable weather. I was here, working late. He switched windows to the text thread with Sienna. November 4th, 9:30 in the evening, Elias read aloud. Text from Sienna. I hate this apartment. The heating is broken. Can I come over? He looked at me. She didn't have a heating problem. She lived in a high-rise with climate control. She was just bored. And Declan was in London, I added. Right, Elias said. I didn't reply at first. Then at 10 o'clock, she sent another one. Declan is trapped in the UK. I have no one to talk to. Don't be a jerk. Elias? She knew he was gone, I said, my voice tightening. She used his absence as an opportunity. She came over around 11, Elias said, his voice devoid of emotion. She was wet from the rain, crying about how her modeling career was stalling, how Declan promised to introduce her to agents but hadn't delivered yet. She brought a bottle of wine. One thing led to another. And you didn't use protection, I stated. It wasn't a question. No, Elias admitted, looking away. Like I said, it was impulsive. We were both angry at him, in different ways. It felt like reclaiming something. He clicked on a file. The next morning, November 5th, 8 in the morning. An image filled the screen. It was Sienna, standing in Elias's kitchen, wearing nothing but a white button-down shirt. The shirt was too big for her. It was obviously a man's shirt. She was holding a mug of coffee, looking soft and rumpled, and undeniably satisfied. The caption she had added to the photo before sending it to him read, "Thanks for the comfort. I needed that." I stared at the photo. The shirt she was wearing had a small, distinctive logo on the pocket, a stylized pine tree. "That is the shirt from the company retreat 3 years ago," I observed. "The one you and Declan designed for the founding team." "Yeah," Elias said. "Irony is a funny thing." "So," I said, turning back to the spreadsheet. "On November 4th and 5th, while Declan was stranded in London, Sienna was sleeping with you. If she is truly 11 weeks pregnant, you are the father. The math is absolute." "But Declan believes it is his," Elias said, "which means she told him a different story." "She shifted the dates," I realized. "She must have told him she's only 9 weeks along. Or maybe she told him the conception happened the moment he got back from London. But wait, in the lawyer's office, Declan said 11 weeks. He was specific." I closed my eyes, visualizing the timeline like a construction schedule. If she told him 11 weeks, I reasoned, then Declan thinks 11 weeks ago was when he was here. He is bad with dates. Elias. He focuses on quarters and fiscal years. He probably forgot exactly which week he was in London. Or she gaslighted him into thinking it was a different week. Or, I paused. Or she told him the baby is 13 weeks. But measuring small no-o, that is too complex. Or, Elias cut in, she simply lied about the date of her last period. Doctors calculate from the last cycle, not the date of conception. It gives a 2-week buffer. If she manipulated that date, she could make the pregnancy look like it started whenever she wanted. "We need the medical records," I said. "We can't just guess. We need to know exactly what the doctor told her. We can't hack a hospital." "Freya," Elias said. "That is a felony. I am bitter, not suicidal." "We don't need to hack," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "We just need to ask the right question to the right person." I pulled out my phone. "Do you know which doctor she is seeing?" Declan mentioned doctor. Sterling insisted on the best, Elias said. "He probably sent her to Dr. Aris at the Women's Pavilion. That is where all the wives go." "Dr. Aris." Of course, Declan was a creature of status. He wouldn't send his mistress to a clinic. He would send her to the most exclusive obstetrician in the city, the same one who delivered the children of his board members. "I know a nurse at the Women's Pavilion," I said. "Linda. We served on the Botanical Garden Charity Committee together last year. She is the head scheduling nurse." "You are going to call her?" Elias asked. "I am going to do a little social engineering," I said. I dialed the number. I put the phone on speaker so Elias could hear. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice, when I spoke, was pure, sugared warmth. "Linda. It is Freya Norwood. How are you?" "Freya." Linda's voice chirped through the speaker. "Oh my goodness, it has been ages. We missed you at the gala this year." "I know. Things have been so chaotic," I said, laughing lightly. "Listen, I am calling with a bit of a strange request, and I hope you can help me out. I am trying to organize a surprise gift for a friend of the family who is a patient there, Sienna Vance." There was a pause. "Oh, yes, Ms. Vance. I have her file right here. She was just in last week." "Right," I said. "Well, Declan, my husband, is so excited. As you can imagine, he wants me to commission a custom nursery design, but the designer needs to know the exact due date to schedule the installation. Declan, typical man, forgot the specific date, doctor. Aris gave, he keeps saying spring, but that is a wide window." I held my breath. This was the gamble. I was banking on Linda assuming that as the wife, I was in the loop, or perhaps that the modern arrangement of our divorce meant we were co-parenting this new development. "Oh, men," Linda laughed. My husband can't remember our anniversary. Let me look. Okay, here we are, based on the ultrasound from her last visit. The official due date is July 28th. I grabbed a pen and scribbled the date on the table. July 28th. July 28th, I repeated. Wonderful. That is perfect timing. Yes, Linda added. She is measuring a little ahead. Actually, Doctor, Aris noted that for a 13-week fetus, the development is very strong. My hand froze. 13 weeks, I asked, keeping my voice steady. I thought Declan said 11. Oh, no, dear, Linda corrected. 13 weeks and 4 days as of today. Conception would have been roughly the first week of November. Maybe Declan is just counting from when he found out. You are probably right, I said, forcing a chuckle. He is terrible with numbers that aren't dollars. Thank you so much. Linda, you have saved the surprise. Anytime. Freya, take care. I hung up. The silence in the warehouse was absolute. I looked at Elias. He looked at me. 13 weeks, I whispered. 13 weeks means conception was definitely the first week of November. When Declan was in London, Elias said, and when she was in your bed, I added. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a terrifying, perfect click. Sienna knew the baby wasn't Declan's. She knew the dates didn't line up, so she had lied to Declan. She told him the baby was 11 weeks old, shifting the conception date to mid-November, after he returned from his trip. But she couldn't lie to the doctor. The ultrasound doesn't lie. The measurements of the femur length and the cranial diameter don't lie. So the medical file had the truth 13 weeks while the father was being fed a fabrication of 11 weeks. She is defrauding him, Elias said, leaning back in his chair. She is pinning my child on a multimillionaire because I can't pay for her lifestyle. And Declan is so desperate for a son, I said. So desperate to validate his choices that he didn't even ask to see the medical report. He just took her word for it. I looked at the spreadsheet. The columns of dates, the flight records, the text messages, and now the medical due date. It was irrefutable. It was a mathematical proof of betrayal. We have her, Elias said quietly. We have them both, I corrected. We have proof she is a liar. And we have proof he is a fool. I felt a cold surge of triumph. It wasn't happiness. It was the satisfaction of a demolition expert who has just identified the exact load-bearing pillar that will bring the whole building down. Freya, Elias said, looking at the screen. There is one more thing. Look at the text she sent me 2 nights ago. I looked. I had missed it in the initial scan. Message from S. Do you want to feel the first kick? It is strong, like that cup of coffee I spilled on your shirt. The first kick, I asked. At 13 weeks, that is early, isn't it? It is, Elias said. But look at the context. She is taunting me. She sends me this. Knowing I can't do anything, she thinks I am weak. She thinks you are defeated. She is wrong, I said. I stood up and paced the concrete floor. We need to present this, but not in a lawyer's office, not in a deposition where they can seal the records and pay us off. What are you thinking? Elias asked. Declan wants a celebration, I said, remembering the invitation that had arrived in my email that morning, a forwarded blast to the Friends of FinCorp. They are hosting a gala next Friday at the Drake Hotel, a new beginnings party, ostensibly for the charity, but everyone knows it is their public debut. I turned to Elias. He spent $18,000 on flowers alone. He wants to show the world his new happiness. And you want to go? Elias asked, skeptical. I don't just want to go, I said, picking up the printout of the timeline. I want to give a toast. I looked at the shirt in the photo again, the shirt Elias had worn, the shirt Sienna had worn. Elias, I said, do you still have that shirt? The one with the pine tree logo? Yeah, he said. It is in a box somewhere. Find it, I said, and wear it. Next Friday. We are going to a party. The plan was no longer a rough sketch. It was a fully rendered blueprint. We had the logic. We had the data. Now, we just needed the audience. The numbers had told their story, and the sum of the equation was 0 for Declan Sterling. The invitation arrived like a declaration of war printed on 300-gram archival cardstock. It was heavy, cream-colored, and edged in gold leaf that likely cost more than the average monthly mortgage payment in Chicago. The font was a sweeping, pretentious script that looked less like handwriting and more like a desperate attempt to legitimize a farce. The Sterling Future Foundation invites you to a gala of new beginnings. I stared at the card sitting on my glass coffee table. A New Beginnings Gala. It was a masterclass in public relations spin. Declan and Sienna were not just having a baby, they were launching a dynasty. They were rebranding their infidelity as a philanthropic event. Rumors in the Gold Coast social circuit suggested that the event was a hybrid monstrosity half-charity auction for tax purposes and half-gender reveal party for narcissistic gratification. My sources told me they had rented the Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel. It is a venue steeped in history, a place where royalty and presidents have dined. And now, it was going to play host to a 26-year-old Instagram model popping a giant balloon, or cutting a cake, or releasing a flock of doves dyed blue to announce the arrival of a son who wasn't even genetically related to the man paying the bill. The extravagance was nauseating. My florist, a discreet woman who handled all the high-end events in the city, had whispered to me over the phone that the budget for flowers alone was $18,000. $18,000 for hydrangeas and imported white roses that would be dead by morning. That amount of money could fund a scholarship for a landscape architecture student for a year, but in the world of Declan Sterling and his new muse, money was just confetti to be thrown in the face of the public to distract them from the smell of scandal. The most insulting part, however, was not the cost. It was the name on the envelope. Ms. Freya Norwood. It had been hand-addressed. I recognized the calligraphy style. It was an extra service offered by the stationer I had used for our wedding invitations 8 years ago. Sienna had sent this. Declan would have been smart enough or cowardly enough to leave me off the list. He would have cited sensitivity, but Sienna, she wanted me there. This invitation was a hunting trophy mount. She wanted me to walk into that room, see her glowing in the spotlight, and acknowledge her victory. She wanted the ex-wife to kiss the ring of the new queen. I was still staring at the invitation when my phone buzzed. It was Declan. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice into a mask of polite detachment. "Hello, Declan." "Freya," he said. His voice was warm, too warm. It had that patronizing cadence he used when speaking to shareholders after a bad quarter. I wanted to call you because I saw the guest list draft. Sienna's assistant seems to have sent an invitation to your office automatically. It was a database error." "Was it?" I asked, picking up the heavy card and running my thumb over the embossed gold letters. "Yes, of course," Declan said quickly. "Look, I know how this looks. I don't want you to feel obligated to come. In fact, it might be better if you didn't. It is going to be a lot. There will be press. I don't want you to be uncomfortable. It might be too painful for you to see us celebrating." I almost laughed. He wasn't trying to protect my feelings. He was trying to protect his narrative. He wanted to shine without the reminder of his betrayal standing in the back of the room. He wanted to be the benevolent patriarch without the ghost of his past haunting the hors d'oeuvres table, but beneath the faux concern. I heard the bragging. He wanted me to know that the party was happening. He wanted me to know he was spending $18,000 on flowers. He wanted me to know he was happy. "Actually, Declan," I said, infusing my tone with a calm, almost serene acceptance. "I would like to come." There was a silence on the other end of the line. You would?" "Yes," I said. "We have been part of each other's lives for a long time. I don't want us to be enemies. I think it is important to show that we can be mature adults. Besides, I want to wish you both well. I want to say goodbye properly." "Oh," Declan said, clearly thrown off script. "Well, that is incredibly gracious of you, Freya. I am impressed, really. I have a gift for you, I added. Something for the baby, something clarifying. You didn't have to do that, he said, his voice swelling with relief. He bought it. He bought the act because his ego couldn't conceive of a world where he wasn't worthy of forgiveness. Thank you, Freya. Really. It will be good to see you. Just keep it low-key. All right. Don't worry, I said, my eyes drifting to the laptop where Elias's timeline was displayed on the screen. I won't make a scene. I just want to deliver the truth. I hung up. The invite felt heavy in my hand. Not like paper, but like a ticket to a demolition derby. The next 48 hours were a study in calculated precision. I met Elias at his warehouse again. We weren't preparing a nursery. We were assembling a weapon. Are you sure about this? Elias asked. He was sitting at his console, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in his glasses. Once we play this, there is no going back. This isn't just a breakup, Freya. This is nuclear. He spent $18,000 on flowers to celebrate a lie. Elias, I said, placing a small, silver USB drive on the desk. He is inviting the entire city to watch him be a fool. I am just providing the educational materials. We went over the files one last time. It was a digital dossier of deceit. First, the flight logs, United Airlines, Flight 904 to London Heathrow, departure, November 1st, return November 10th, the delay confirmation due to the storm. It was all there, black and white data that no amount of charm could erase. Second, the weather reports for Chicago on November 4th and 5th. Freezing rain, the kind of weather that traps people inside. Third, the text messages. We had exported them into a clean, readable video format. The timestamps were highlighted. November 4th, 10:30 p.m. Declan is trapped in the UK. I'm lonely. And finally, the crown jewel. Elias had found it deep in his cloud backup. It was a voice note Sienna had sent him the morning after their tryst. She must have been giddy, perhaps a little hungover, and feeling reckless. I put on the headphones to listen to it one last time. Sienna's voice filled my ears, crisp and laughing. Elias, stop worrying. Declan doesn't suspect a thing. He is a gold mine, sweetie, a boring, corporate gold mine. But you are the fun part. Let's just keep this our little secret until I get that ring. Okay. I took off the headphones. She called him a gold mine. She did, Elias said, leaning back. She called me fun, and him a gold mine. It is almost poetic in its cruelty. It is perfect, I said. Load it onto the drive, and make a backup. I don't want technical difficulties to save them. We prepared 2 identical USB drives. One would be in my clutch. One would be in Elias's pocket. We were not taking chances with the AV system at the Drake. Then came the question of the armor. For a woman in my position, the discarded wife appearing at the ex-husband's celebration of New Life Society dictates 2 choices. You either wear black, signaling mourning and victimhood, or you wear red, signaling desperation and a cry for attention. I chose neither. I went to my closet and pulled out a garment bag I had been saving for a Pritzker Prize ceremony that never happened. It was a dress of deep, midnight navy blue silk. The color was almost black, but under the lights, it shimmered with the cold, hard brilliance of sapphire. It was not a soft dress. It had a square neckline that framed my collarbones like a portrait. The bodice was structured, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. Holding me upright like a steel cage, the skirt flowed straight down, architectural and severe, with a slit that allowed for movement but revealed nothing unnecessary. I put it on in front of the full-length mirror. I looked like the CEO of a company that manufactures storms. I looked expensive. I looked dangerous. I did not look like a woman who had been replaced. I looked like the woman who did the replacing. I paired it with simple diamond studs, no hoops. Never hoops and silver heels that looked like blades. When Elias arrived to pick me up, he whistled low. He was wearing a tuxedo, but he had foregone the traditional cummerbund. Beneath his jacket, I could see the collar of the white shirt with the small pine tree logo. It was subtle. Only Sienna would recognize it. To everyone else, it was just a shirt. To her, it would be a ghost story. "You look like you are about to assassinate a head of state," Elias said, offering me his arm. "We are doing something better," I said, grabbing the silver clutch that held the USB drive. "We are assassinating a lie." The drive to the Drake was silent. The city of Chicago rolled past the windows, a blur of lights and wet pavement. I thought about the $18,000 in flowers. I thought about the Manolo Blahnik shoes on Sienna's feet. I thought about the way Declan had looked at me in that office, offering to buy me out of my own home so he could play house with a fraud. Every traffic light we passed felt like a countdown. When we pulled up to the entrance of the Drake, the valet opened the door. The air smelled of exhaust and expensive perfume. I stepped out, my heel clicking sharply on the pavement. "Ready?" Elias asked, adjusting his cuffs. "The question isn't if we are ready," I said, looking up at the awning where the Sterling Future Foundation was projected in light. "The question is, are they—" We walked through the revolving doors and into the lobby. The hotel was buzzing. Women in floor-length gowns and men in tuxedos were drifting toward the Gold Coast room. I saw faces I recognized: clients, board members, socialites who had eaten at my table and drunk my wine. They stopped talking when they saw me. The silence rippled outward from the door like a wave. Eyes widened. Whispers started behind manicured hands. "Is that Freya? What is she doing here? Who is that with her? Is that Elias Thorne?" I thought he was dead to the industry. I kept my head high, my expression pleasant but unapproachable. I nodded to a former client who looked like she might faint. I smiled coolly at Declan's VP of Operations, who suddenly found his shoes very interesting. We reached the check-in table. The young woman with the clipboard looked up, her smile faltering when she recognized me. "Name?" she squeaked. "Freya Norwood," I said, my voice clear. "And guest?" She fumbled with the list. "Oh, yes, you are on the list? Table 12? "Thank you," I said. I took the program she handed me. It was printed on the same thick cream paper. The schedule of events listed cocktails, welcome speech by Declan Sterling, video presentation, a journey of love, the reveal, a journey of love. I looked at Elias. He smirked. "Video presentation," he murmured. "How convenient. They have a projector set up. And a sound system," I added. We walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of blue and gold. The $18,000 was visible everywhere. Hydrangeas cascaded from the ceiling. Centerpieces of white orchids and blue delphiniums towered over every table. It looked like a funeral for a smurf, opulent and ridiculous. Declan was standing near the stage, shaking hands. He looked triumphant. He looked untouchable. And then he saw me. His smile froze. He blinked, as if trying to clear a hallucination. He hadn't expected me to actually show up, and he certainly hadn't expected me to look like this. He had expected the broken ex-wife. Instead, he got the architect of his demise. Sienna was beside him, clinging to his arm. She wore white. Of course, a flowing Grecian gown that emphasized the bump. She followed Declan's gaze. Her eyes locked on mine. Then they shifted to Elias. I saw the color drain from her face. It happened in an instant. The radiant, glowing mother-to-be turned into a statue of chalk. She recognized the shirt. She recognized the man. And she realized, with a dawning horror, that the walls of her perfect fortress were made of glass. And I was holding a bag of stones. I squeezed Elias's arm. "Let's go say hello," I whispered. "I want to give them their gift before the cake is cut." We stepped onto the plush carpet, moving toward the happy couple. The crowd parted for us, sensing the electricity in the air. The music from the string quartet seemed to fade. All I could hear was the beating of my own heart, steady and strong, a war drum announcing the end of the piece. We were not here to ruin the party. We were here to correct the record. And as I gripped the cool metal of the USB drive in my clutch, I knew that by the time we left, the $18,000 in flowers would be the only thing in this room that wasn't broken. The Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel is a masterpiece of architectural intimidation, with its pillared colonnades, gilded molding, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. It was designed to make human beings feel small. Tonight, however, the room felt less like a ballroom and more like a pressurized containment vessel. The air was thick, heavy with the cloying scent of 3,000 white hydrangeas and the expensive perfume of 200 socialites. The ambient noise was a low, vibrating hum of crystal, touching crystal, and gossip being traded like currency. I walked into this arena with Elias Thorne on my arm, and I felt the atmosphere shift instantly. It was a physical sensation, like stepping from a warm room into a meat locker. The string quartet, tucked away in the corner playing a sanitized version of a pop ballad, seemed to falter for a beat before recovering. Heads turned. It wasn't a ripple, it was a wave. I could feel the eyes tracking us, the wives of board members, the investors, the rivals. They were dissecting my appearance, looking for the cracks, looking for the tear-stained cheeks of the abandoned woman. Instead, they found the steel-plated hull of a warship. My navy dress caught the light of the chandeliers, shimmering with a cold, dark brilliance that swallowed the room's golden warmth. Beside me, Elias was a ghost returned from the dead, his tuxedo sharp, his expression unreadable. We moved through the crowd, the path cleared for us, not out of respect, but out of a primal instinct to avoid the blast radius. "Keep walking," Elias murmured, his voice barely audible over the din. "Don't look at them. Look at the target." I fixed my eyes on the stage at the far end of the room. Declan and Sienna were holding court near the tiered champagne tower. The scene was almost comically perfect. Sienna was draped in white chiffon, a dress that flowed around her body like water, gathered empire style to emphasize the small, rounded curve of her stomach. She looked angelic, fragile, and utterly manufactured. Her hair was swept up in a loose chignon, secured with diamond pins that glittered under the stage lights. She was playing the role of the Madonna, the sacred vessel of the sterling legacy. Declan stood beside her, one hand possessively on the small of her back. He was laughing at something a senator was saying, his head thrown back, his posture exuding the easy confidence of a man who believes he has rewritten history. Then, the senator moved aside, and Declan saw us. The laugh died in his throat. It didn't taper off. It was severed. His hand froze on Sienna's back. His eyes widened, darting from my face to Elias's face, and then down to Elias's chest. He didn't recognize the shirt. Why would he? To him, it was just white cotton. But he recognized the man. He recognized the partner he had betrayed, standing next to the wife he had discarded. I saw a flicker of genuine fear behind his eyes. It was the look of a man who suddenly realizes the glass walls of his house are not bulletproof. We stopped 5 feet away from them. The bubble of silence around us expanded, pushing the other guests back. "Freya," Declan said. His voice was tight, strained. He cleared his throat and tried again, forcing the social mask back into place. "And Elias, I didn't know you two were acquainted." "Chicago is a small town, Declan," Elias said smoothly. He didn't offer his hand. He kept his hands in his pockets, his stance relaxed but ready. "We reconnected recently, comparing notes on old business." Declan flinched at the word business. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to maintain the peace, to play the gracious ex-wife I had promised to be on the phone. "You look lovely, Freya," he said, the compliment sounding like a frantic peace offering. "Thank you for coming. Really?" Before I could answer, Sienna stepped forward. She moved with a practiced grace, placing a hand on Declan's arm as if to steady herself, or perhaps to claim him. She looked at me with eyes that were hard and bright, like polished marbles, up close. The fragility was gone. I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her manicured fingers dug slightly into Declan's sleeve. She leaned in close, invading my personal space under the guise of a greeting air kiss. She smelled of vanilla and ambition. "I am so surprised you actually came," she whispered. Her voice, a sugary hiss, meant only for me. Most women would have hidden away. "But thank you. Freya, thank you for coming to see us so happy. It must be hard, knowing this is the life you couldn't give him." She pulled back, smiling beatifically for the onlookers. It was a masterstroke of cruelty, designed to make me snap, to make me cause a scene that would validate her narrative of the crazy, jealous ex. But I am an architect. I know that rigid structures break in high winds. You have to be flexible. You have to absorb the energy and redirect it. I smiled back. It was a slow, terrifying smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Happiness is a beautiful thing, Sienna," I said, my voice calm and carrying just enough for the surrounding circle to hear. "But be careful with the foundation. Happiness built on sand tends to sink very quickly when the storm comes." Sienna's smile faltered. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. She opened her mouth to retort, but Elias stepped forward, shifting the focus. "Congratulations, Declan," Elias said. "I hear it is a boy, a son. That is what you always wanted. Right, a legacy?" "Yes," Declan said, standing taller, relieved to be back on the topic of his virility. "A son. We are over the moon. He is due in late July." Elias nodded slowly, doing a mental calculation that was visible on his face. "Late July. So that means he was conceived. Right around the time of the FinTech Summit in London, I remember that week. You were stuck at Heathrow for 3 days. Declan blinked. He looked confused, his brow furrowing. Yes, around then. It has been a whirlwind. The dates blur together." "Funny how that happens," Elias said, his eyes locking onto Sienna. "Time can be so flexible when you need it to be." Sienna went rigid. She understood. I saw the realization hit her like a physical blow. She looked at Elias, really looked at him, and her gaze dropped to his open jacket. She saw the white shirt. She saw the small, embroidered pine tree on the pocket. Her breath hitched. It was a tiny sound, a gasp of pure, unadulterated panic. Her hand flew to her throat. She looked from Elias to me, and the color drained from her face so completely that her makeup stood out in stark, garish relief. She knew that we knew. "Declan," she said, her voice high and brittle. I need some water. It is hot in here." "Of course, darling," Declan said, oblivious to the silent communication passing between the three of us. He signaled a waiter. "Get some water, and maybe a chair." "I am fine," Sienna snapped. Losing her composure for a split second, she glared at me, her eyes filled with hate and terror. "We should start the presentation. The guests are waiting." "Right," Declan said, checking his watch. "Yes, the timeline. We need to stick to the schedule." He looked at me, regaining some of his arrogance now that the awkward conversation was ending. "Enjoy the show. Freya, the video team put together something really special, a tribute to our journey." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. Declan guided a stumbling Sienna toward the front tables. As soon as they turned their backs, the smile dropped from my face. "She knows," Elias murmured. "Did you see her face?" "She knows." I agreed. "But she thinks she can still brazen it out. She thinks we are bluffing." I looked toward the back of the room, where a raised platform held the audio-visual control booth. A young technician wearing a headset was monitoring a bank of screens. This was the nerve center. "Go find our seats," I told Elias. "I have a delivery to make." "Be fast," Elias said. "The MC is walking to the podium." I slipped away from the center of the room. Moving through the shadows along the perimeter, I walked with purpose, the heavy silver clutch pressed against my side. I reached the velvet rope cordoning off the AV booth. The technician, a guy named Kevin whom I had met earlier that week under the pretense of coordinating a surprise toast, looked up. I had found Kevin 3 days ago. It wasn't hard. LinkedIn listed the event production company. A little research revealed Kevin was a freelance videographer with substantial student loans. I had met him for coffee, explained that I wanted to add a sentimental tribute to the slideshow as a surprise for my ex-husband. I didn't tell him what was on the drive. I just told him it was $5,000 in cash if he played my file instead of the original when the time came. Kevin looked nervous. He was sweating under the collar of his black polo shirt. "Ms. Norwood," he whispered as I approached the rail. I don't know about this. The stage manager is watching me like a hawk." "The stage manager is busy checking the champagne inventory," I said calmly, slipping the silver USB drive into his hand. It was warm from my grip. "This is the file, Kevin, just like we discussed. It is the only file that matters." "If I get fired," he stammered. "If you get fired, I will hire you to document the renovation of the Botanical Gardens Conservatory for double your current rate," I promised. "But you won't get fired for a technical glitch. Just play the drive." I looked him in the eye. "Do the right thing. Kevin, it is a better story." He hesitated, looking at the drive, then at the stage where Declan was now shaking hands with the MC. He took a deep breath and nodded, sliding the drive into the port of the main console. "You have 2 minutes," he whispered. "That is all I need." I turned and walked back into the crowd. I found Elias at table 12, a table purposefully placed near the back. Near the kitchen doors, another petty slight by Sienna to keep me out of the frame. It was perfect. It gave us a panoramic view of the destruction. I sat down, smoothing the silk of my dress. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer, adrenaline-fueled anticipation of the climax. The lights in the Gold Coast room dimmed to a hush, swallowing the $18,000 worth of floral arrangements into the shadows. The only illumination came from the massive projector screen descending from the ceiling, glowing like a monolith in the darkness. The audience, a sea of diamonds and tuxedos, turned their faces upward, ready to be fed the fairy tale. Soft, orchestral strings began to swell from the surround sound speakers, a melody so cloying and sentimental it felt like syrup being poured into our ears. The video began. It was a montage of high-definition clips, Declan and Sienna laughing on a sailboat, Sienna touching her stomach in a sunlit meadow, the two of them clinking champagne glasses on a private jet. It was the perfect commercial for a life that didn't exist. "Look at them," a woman at the table next to us whispered. "They really do look happy." "He never looked that relaxed with Freya," her husband muttered back. I took a sip of my water, the ice clinking softly against the glass. Elias sat beside me, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the screen like a sniper waiting for the wind to settle. On screen, the words, "Our Miracle," faded in with a golden shimmer, followed by a slow-motion shot of Declan kissing Sienna's forehead. The room erupted in polite, enthusiastic applause. Sienna, standing near the stage in the semi-darkness, beamed, basking in the adoration. She clutched Declan's hand, playing the role of the beloved matriarch to perfection, and then the music skipped. It wasn't a subtle fade, it was a harsh, digital screech, like a microphone being dragged across concrete. The beautiful image of the sunlit meadow froze, pixelated violently, and then shattered into static. The applause died instantly. A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was a technical hiccup. "Kevin," Declan hissed, waving his hand at the booth. "Fix it." But the static didn't return to the meadow. The screen went black for a heartbeat, a void that sucked the air out of the room. When it flared to life again, the soft golden lighting of the romance montage was gone. In its place was the stark, blinding white of a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. The font was aggressive, magnified to fill the entire 20-foot screen. It wasn't art, it was data. Flight log Declan Sterling, destination London Heathrow. Status delayed due to severe weather. Dates November 1st through November 10th. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. "What is this?" someone whispered. "Is this the business plan?" Before the question could settle, the slide changed. It was a screenshot of a text message. blown up so large that every pixel of the blue bubble was visible. Sender Sienna Vance. Recipient Elias Thorne. Date November 4th. Time 10:30 in the evening. The message read, "He is gone. He is stuck in London for 3 days. I am lonely. Come over." The room did not gasp. It stopped breathing. The silence was sudden and absolute, a vacuum created by the sudden evacuation of politeness. Sienna's face, illuminated by the ghostly light of the screen, went from confusion to sheer, unadulterated terror. She recognized the text. She recognized the formatting. She realized, in that split second, that the monster in the room wasn't me, it was her own history. "No," she whimpered, the sound amplified by the sudden quiet. She lunged toward the stage, toward the technical booth. "Turn it off, Kevin. Turn it off now." But the video was relentless. The slide dissolved, and the screen went black again. Then came the sound. It wasn't music, it was a recording. The quality was crystal clear, played at maximum volume through the hotel's concert-grade speakers. It was Sienna's voice, unmistakable in its cadence, but stripped of the sweet, public persona she had worn all evening. This was the voice of the predator. "I honestly don't know whose baby it is. Elias?" The voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, bouncing off the marble pillars. "But let's be real. Declan is richer than you, much richer. He is a gold mine. I have to choose the one who can support me. I have to secure the bag." "Liar!" Sienna screamed, her voice cracking as she stood below the screen, looking small and desperate against the towering evidence. "That is fake. That is AI. They made it up." She grabbed Declan's arm, shaking him. "Declan, listen to me. It is a fabrication. She is jealous. She is trying to ruin us." Declan did not move. He stood frozen in the center of the stage, a statue carved from shock. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide and unseeing. In his right hand, he held a crystal flute of vintage champagne. The recording ended, but the visual assault was not over. The screen flashed white one last time. This was the death blow. It was a split screen. On the left, Declan's sterling location, London, United Kingdom. November 1st to November 10th. On the right, medical ultrasound report. Patient Sienna Vance. And below it, in bold red letters that seemed to drip down the screen, actual gestational age. 16 weeks. Conception. Date week of November 4th. The math hung over the room like a guillotine blade. 16 weeks. November 4th. The exact week Declan was 4,000 miles away. The exact night Sienna had texted Elias. The sound of glass shattering broke the spell. Declan's hand had gone limp. The champagne flute fell, hitting the hardwood of the stage floor and exploding into 100 glittering shards. The sound was sharp, violent, and final. Champagne splashed onto his polished dress shoes. But he didn't flinch. He didn't look down. He stared at the screen. He read the words, 16 weeks over and over again. You could see the gears turning in his mind, the denial crumbling under the weight of the biological imperative. He was a man of numbers. He ran a fintech company. He knew that numbers didn't lie. Only people did. Sienna collapsed. It wasn't a graceful, theatrical faint. Her legs simply gave out. She crumpled to the floor amidst the folds of her white Grecian gown, sobbing hysterically, her hands covering her face. "It is not true," she wailed, her voice muffled by her palms but still audible in the dead, silent room. "He was there. He came back early. It is a mistake. The doctor is wrong." She looked up at Declan, crawling toward him on her knees, disregarding the broken glass. "Declan, please look at me. I love you. It is your son. I swear it is your son." Declan slowly lowered his gaze from the screen to the woman weeping at his feet. I had seen Declan look at her with lust. I had seen him look at her with adoration. I had seen him look at her with pride. But I had never seen this look. It was a look of absolute, revulsed horror. It was the way one looks at a parasite they have just discovered burrowed into their skin. His lip curled upward, trembling slightly, revealing a flash of teeth and a grimace of pure disgust. He took a step back, then another. He pulled his foot away as Sienna reached for his trouser leg, recoiling as if her touch was contagious. 16 weeks, Declan whispered. His voice was hoarse, barely a croak, but in the acoustic perfection of the room. Everyone heard it. Declan, no, Sienna sobbed, mascara streaming down her cheeks, ruining the pristine mask she had spent hours creating. You said 11, Declan said, his voice rising, gaining strength from the sudden rush of fury. You told me 11 weeks. You showed me a fake date. He looked out at the audience, his eyes wild, searching for someone, anyone, to make sense of the nightmare. His gaze landed on the back table, on me, and on Elias. Elias sat perfectly still, his face impassive. I sat with my hands folded, my expression calm. I did not look away. I held his gaze, letting him see exactly who had lit the match. The crowd began to move. It started as a murmur, a low rumble of shock and judgment, and then escalated into a chaotic shifting of chairs. People were standing up, pulling out their phones, recording the meltdown. The New Beginnings gala had turned into a public execution, and nobody wanted to miss the finale. Get away from me, Declan spat, looking down at Sienna. Declan, please, I said get away, he roared, his voice cracking. He looked around the stage, as if waking up in a burning house. He looked at the $18,000 of flowers. He looked at the Our Miracle banner. He looked at the shattered glass. He looked like a man who realized he had sold his soul for a counterfeit coin. Sienna lay on the floor, weeping into the carpet, a broken doll in a ruined white dress. The video on the screen had stopped, but the final image, 16 weeks, remained frozen, burning its truth into the retinas of every person in the room. I stood up. I think, I said to Elias, my voice low and steady amidst the chaos, that the gift has been delivered. Elias nodded, standing up beside me. Let's go. Before the air gets any thinner. We turned our backs on the stage, on the sobbing mistress, and on the devastated husband. Behind us, the sound of a dynasty crumbling was louder than any applause. The Gold Coast room had dissolved into absolute anarchy. The polite veneer of Chicago society, usually so thick and impenetrable, had been stripped away by the brutal efficiency of the truth we had just projected onto the screen. The silence that had followed the revelation of the 16-week timeline was gone, replaced by a cacophony of whispers, gasps, and the frantic clicking of camera shutters. The guests, who minutes ago had been sipping champagne and nodding at Declan's speech about legacy, were now holding their phones aloft, recording the wreckage of the Sterling dynasty like tourists at a disaster site. I stood near the back of the room, my hand resting lightly on the back of a velvet chair. I watched the scene unfold with the detached precision of a demolition expert watching a building implode. The structural beams had been severed. The foundation had liquefied. Gravity was doing the rest. On the stage, the tableau was pathetic. Sienna was still on the floor, surrounded by the shards of the broken champagne flute and the ruin of her white dress. She was sobbing, but no one was rushing to comfort her. The circle of socialites had widened, creating a no-man's land around her, as if her deception was a contagious disease. Declan stood above her, his chest heaving. His face, usually so composed and pale, was now flushed a deep, mottled crimson. It was the color of humiliation. He looked at the woman at his feet, the woman he had destroyed his marriage for, the woman he had bought a home for, the woman he had tried to force me to subsidize, and his expression was one of pure, unadulterated revulsion. He looked like he wanted to scrub his skin raw. Then he looked up. His eyes scanned the room, wild and desperate, searching for an anchor in the storm. He ignored his weeping mistress. He ignored his horrified board members. His gaze locked onto me. I was standing under the soft glow of a wall sconce, the navy blue silk of my dress looking like armor against the chaos. Elias stood beside me, silent and grim, a sentinel of the truth. Declan saw me, and for a moment, I saw the old Declan flicker behind the panic, the Declan who relied on me to fix his mistakes, the Declan who knew that Freya always had a plan. Freya always had a solution. Freya always knew how to clean up the mess. He took a step toward the edge of the stage. Then another. He looked like he was about to jump down, to run across the ballroom floor and beg me to make it stop. He opened his mouth, and though I could not hear him over the noise of the crowd, I saw his lips form my name. Freya. I did not move toward him. I did not soften. Instead, I raised my right hand, palm out, fingers spread. Stop. It was a simple gesture, but it hit him with the force of a physical blow. He froze at the edge of the stage, his toes hanging over the drop. He realized, in that instant, that I was not his fixer anymore. I was not his wife. I was the architect of this moment, and I had no intention of saving him from the rubble. I turned to Elias. "It is time," I said. I walked forward. I did not rush. I moved with a steady, rhythmic cadence, my silver heels clicking sharply on the parquet floor. The crowd parted for me instinctively. They saw the look on my face, cold, calm, and terrifyingly lucid, and they moved aside like water. I reached the base of the stage. I did not climb up to join them in their humiliation. I stayed on the floor, looking up at Declan. He looked down at me, his eyes wet, his hands trembling at his sides. "Freya," he choked out, his voice a broken rasp that barely carried over the din. "Freya, please. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I didn't know." I ignored him. I walked over to the podium that had been set up on the floor level for the toasts. I adjusted the microphone stand. The feedback whined for a split second, a high-pitched shriek that silenced the room instantly. The guests froze. The phones were lowered slightly, then raised again, eager to capture the final act. I looked at Declan. I looked at Sienna, who had lifted her tear-streaked face to stare at me with hatred. Then I looked out at the room, at the hundreds of people who had come to celebrate a lie. "I did not come here tonight to win him back," I said. My voice was amplified, clear and steady, filling every corner of the ballroom. There was no tremor in it, no sadness. "I did not come here to make a scene out of jealousy," I continued, my gaze returning to Declan. "I came here because for 8 years, I built a life based on truth. I built a home based on integrity. And when you shattered that, Declan, you didn't just break a marriage. You tried to rewrite reality. You tried to sell a fabrication to the world. And you expected me to pay for the ticket." Declan flinched. He looked like he was shrinking inside his bespoke suit. "You wanted a legacy," I said, my voice hardening. "You wanted a son so badly that you were willing to discard the woman who stood by you for a decade. You were willing to buy out my share of our home to house a lie. You were willing to let another man's child carry your name because it fed your ego." I paused, letting the words sink in. "But betrayal always has a price. Declan, the invoice always comes due, and tonight, you are paying it." I looked at Sienna. "And the child," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, losing its edge but keeping its weight. "That baby is innocent. He did not ask to be part of a scheme. He did not ask to be used as a bargaining chip for a condo or a marriage license. He deserves better. He deserves to know who he actually is. He deserves to know his father." I stepped back from the mic and pointed my hand toward Elias. Elias walked forward. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Declan. He looked straight at Sienna. He walked up the stairs to the stage, moving past Declan as if he were invisible. He stood over Sienna, looking down at her with a mixture of pity and resolve. Sienna cowered, pulling her knees to her chest. "Elias, don't," she sobbed. "Please." Elias reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a microphone from the stand on stage. "If that baby is mine," Elias said, his voice deep and rough, echoing through the hall. I will take responsibility. I will pay for the doctor. I will pay for his school. I will be there every weekend, every birthday, and every graduation. He will not grow up without a father. Sienna looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. She thought he was offering her a lifeline. She thought he was offering to save her, but, Elias continued, his voice turning to ice. Make no mistake. Sienna, you and I are done. You will never step foot in my house. You will never wear my ring. You will never be my partner. We will co-parent, strictly and legally. That is the only relationship we will ever have. He dropped the mic. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Sienna wailed, a sound of pure despair. She had lost the billionaire. She had lost the backup plan. She was alone with nothing but her ambition and a baby she had tried to use as currency. I walked over to the large round table near the stage, the table where the massive, 3-tier New Beginnings cake sat, untouched and ridiculous with its blue fondant icing. I opened my silver clutch. I pulled out a thick, folded document. It was the divorce petition, not the draft Evelyn had prepared with the settlement offer. This was the final version, the one where I demanded full restoration of my assets, full reimbursement for marital funds spent on his affair, and immediate dissolution of the marriage on the grounds of adultery and fraud. I placed the papers on the white tablecloth, right next to the silver cake knife. Happy new beginning, Declan, I said. I turned my back on them. I did not look at the guests. I did not look at the camera phones. I focused on the exit doors at the far end of the room. They were double doors, heavy mahogany with brass handles. They looked like the gateway to freedom. I began to walk. Click, click, click. My heels struck the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a clock ticking down the final seconds of a bomb. I felt the eyes of the room on my back. Burning, judging, awestruck. I kept my chin high. My shoulders were back. My dress flowed around me like water, cool and dark. Freya! Declan's voice rang out behind me. It was desperate. It was the sound of a man who had realized he had thrown away a diamond to pick up a piece of broken glass. Freya, wait, don't go. We can fix this. I did not slow down. I did not hesitate. Fix it. There was nothing to fix. You do not fix a building that has been condemned. You bulldoze it and you walk away from the dust. Freya, he screamed again, closer this time, as if he had jumped off the stage to follow me. I reached the double doors. I pushed them open. The heavy wood gave way, and I stepped out into the lobby. I kept walking, past the shocked concierge, past the whispering bellhops, past the gilded mirrors that reflected a woman who looked nothing like the broken wife I was supposed to be. I looked like a queen who had just conquered a kingdom she no longer wanted. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the Chicago night. The wind hit me first. It was cold, sharp, and smelling of the lake. It whipped my hair across my face and chilled the bare skin of my arms, but it felt magnificent. It felt clean. It stripped away the scent of the hydrangeas and the perfume and the lies. I walked to the curb. The doorman, sensing my energy, blew his whistle instantly. A yellow taxi pulled up. I opened the door and slid into the worn leather seat. Where to, lady? The driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Anywhere, I said. Just drive north. Take Lakeshore Drive. You got it. The taxi pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back at the hotel. I didn't look up to see if Declan was standing in the window. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. There were 5 missed calls from Declan, 12 text messages. Freya, please pick up. I am sorry. I was a fool. She lied to me. I love you. I looked at the words. They meant nothing. They were just pixels on a screen, devoid of value. I opened his contact card. I scrolled down to the bottom. My thumb hovered over the red text. Block caller. I pressed it. The messages disappeared. The silence on the phone matched the silence in my head. I rolled down the window. The wind roared into the car, loud and chaotic, drowning out the memory of the music, the screams, and the shattering glass. I took a deep breath. filling my lungs with the freezing air. I was 34 years old. I was alone in a taxi in the middle of the night. I had no husband. I had a messy legal battle ahead of me. I had a broken past. But as I watched the city lights blur into streaks of gold and red against the black water of Lake Michigan, I realized something profound. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't worrying about Declan's schedule. I wasn't worrying about his image. I wasn't worrying about being the perfect wife or the perfect architect of a perfect life. I was just Freya. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. A small smile touched my lips, not the sharp, dangerous smile I had worn in the ballroom, but a real one, a soft one. I had exposed the lie. I had walked through the fire, and I had come out the other side not as ash, but as steel. The war was over, and finally, I had peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts on Freya's journey and how she handled the ultimate betrayal. Where are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and resilience, please subscribe to the Scarlet Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us.